Only until recently have I been actually doing my bevels freehand instead of using some kind of a jig or with an actual file. Since then, I've really enjoyed doing types of daggers. And specifically, my favorite to do is the Fairbairns, I'm not sure on that one, Fairbairns-Sykes Fighting Knife, which is essentially a stiletto-style double-edged blade. And this particular video, what we're going to do is we're going to make it with the copper, only this time I'm going to put double the amount that I normally do in it. So, here we go. Up to this point, all you've seen me do basically is clean the steel, cut it to the right shape, and that's kind of it. I happen to have a semi-high, or well, medium-high layer count Damascus already sitting around, not doing anything. So I decided that's what I'm going to use for the outside. Here we have the normal copper. It's 2 inches wide. That whole length, honestly, I couldn't tell you. Probably 10 feet is what it started as, but not anymore. And I also decided to use shears instead of an angle grinder to cut it off, instead of like last time. This is just acetone, as usual, cleaning everything off. This one kind of fought me a little bit, as you're going to see right here. But eventually I was able to get it locked in with that C-clamp right there, and then into the post vise so that we can weld it up. The primary difference between welding a billet up with copper in it and regular Damascus is that you actually have to close all the seams all the way around the billet. And this takes a little bit of time and extra wire for sure. So now we got it all welded up. We're going to go ahead and stick it in the forge and let it heat up. Remembering this from the last video, I'm actually not sure if I said anything about it, but you can't actually heat this billet up all the way up to the same temperatures you would for old steel Damascus. The primary reason for that is if you do, you end up squishing all the copper out and then it's a fail, which is not what I'm trying to do. In this particular seam, I know it looks like I got it maybe a little too hot, and I very easily may have done that, but I didn't lose any copper in the billet, and it still came out looking pretty good. For the first part of this forging process, you're basically just going to see me drawing it out, making sure the welds are set, and then I've got a couple things I wanted to try in this particular go-around. One of the things I wanted to do, and I think the result from it in the last video came out really well, it's kind of a chevron-style ladder Damascus instead of the straight up and down lines. Here you can actually see those cutouts that I did. I've got it going, and then I decided, oh, this end, that end. Oh, okay, here we go. This is where we're going to start. And it was the hottest end. That was definitely the right choice. But all we're doing is drawing this out a little bit more, and all of those chevrons or V's, as they look now, those will all go away or actually be worked into the billet itself. I actually got quite a bit of steel out of this one, about 31 inches, so I was pretty happy with that. But it's about 3/16 or so, maybe just a hair more than that, but most of that's going to be scale, which you'll see me grind off here in a minute. All I'm doing here is measuring out the approximate measurements, slightly oversized, for the fighting knife itself. Then to clean off all the scale, so it makes it easier to put layout fluid and clearly see it so that I can draw the full design on the blade itself, and then start to grind away those extra pieces that are not necessary. One of the biggest differences between a regular Damascus steel billet and this copper Damascus billet is you can't actually hammer on it, or else I would have hammered that point in. All we're doing here is filing the, what would be called the ricasso, except for there's not going to be a space for that, all the way down to make it nice and level and basically perpendicular from the point of the blade to the tang. And because it is a Fairbairns-Sykes Fighting Knife, it's basically a dagger shape, so that bevel is going to go all the way to the center, which is what I'm marking. One of the trickiest things I found, but still looks really great, is making sure that when you're doing a dagger or some type of dagger style knife like this, that the bevels are the same size on each side, and you have to do that 4 times, and they've got to kind of come to the same center point. Once the knife is generally in its right shape, we go into the quench. Pretty much like I do every time I make any type of knife and I've done the heat treat, I let it cool off so I can actually touch it like you see there, and then I try to just grind off using an old belt some of that built up scale that is just going to be nasty. And I also wanted to test the hardness of this before I put it in the oven. So that center part, that's Damascus, regular steel Damascus, and then I also have an 80 CRV core, which is what I'm pointing at right there. And at this stage of the game, they worked out to 65 HRC, which is pretty darn hard. And now it goes into the oven at about 375 to 400 for 2 hours of an hour and a half each, and I end up flipping on each side. Once that's done, we start actually putting in the final bevels so they come down to a more finer edge. So I wanted to take a little bit to explain exactly what it is I'm doing. Some people like to do hand sanding. I'm not one of those people. When I use the belt grinder, it creates scratches that go across the blade in this direction, okay? And what I'm trying to do is get those gone out, and I'll make a lot of scratches and then progressively finer scratches to a mirror polish to get rid of those. Here's a good example of just one little blemish. It's right there. But that's just one. That's the only one that I had that was on that one. But here's another good example, and as you can see, there are vertical scratches going the entire length of the blade. And that's what I'm doing, is trying to get rid of those. And now it's on to the most intense part of the build, hand sanding. Once we get it to 1200 grit, this is where I usually use the soap and water, hot water, to get all the oils off. And again, if it looks clean, scrub it one more time. Once everything's nice and clean, we get it prepped and into the ferric chloride. So I wanted to show this process too. As you can see when the knife comes out of the acid, it's almost a gray or black, and the only reason we have any color at all is because of that copper. So this is the process I usually do. First, once I get it out, I'm going to dunk it in just some plain old, well, it's what I use to catch any of the stuff coming off the belt sander. Spray it with some glass cleaner, and then just give it a little rub. This is just getting the big stuff off. I'm not trying to do an actual polish. I'm using the same grit that I finished with before it went into the acid, and in this particular go-around, it's a 1200 grit sandpaper. Once we get that up to 2000 grit, we basically are done. And so all we do is kind of polish it and admire it. Well, if you stuck around this long, you must like what I do, and it sure is appreciated that you stuck this far into the video. And if you haven't already subscribed, I hope you hit that subscribe button today. If you have subscribed, leave me a like and a comment. Let me know you're there. We're going to put a handle on this in the next video, and until then, we'll see you in the next one.